Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce Nadia Berthouze. She's a professor in the University College London and a well-recognized authority in the areas of affective computer, human-computer interaction, and she kindly accepted our invitation to be here. So, with not much ado, I'll leave the word to Nadia and thank her again for being here with us in our meeting of the Academia Mexicana de Computación. I'm looking forward for a very interesting talk. Thank you.
So, thank you, Luis and Enrique, for inviting me and this in your annual meeting, and also in this beautiful place. Congratulations for all the award I saw before, and also kind of a moving moment afterwards. So also my condolences and my dearest feeling to the person involved. So in this talk, I'll present some of the work I'm doing in the area of affective computing, or also affective interaction, and in the area of health and well-being. I'll present a work that I've been doing for a project I've been working for now quite many years, and also a new project we just started. It's less than 1 year and funded by the European Commission, and is a multi-party project. So, and if there will be time, I will also show something about another study we have started to do. So the first project I present is related to chronic pain, to physical rehabilitation in general. And I've been working on this in this area for quite a few years. And when I started, the sensing technology was becoming quite cheap and available in everybody's home. But the type of technology that was still designed for supporting physical rehabilitation was mainly looking at the physical aspect. So it was about a Kinect or other sensor that were available there to monitor the correctness of the movement and provide very useful information to understand the progress of the person. And there was a little attention to the psychological needs of the patient by trying to integrate this sensing technology into games, for example, and making something that is quite hard, repetitive exercise, boring, frustrating, and painful, more engaging, and somehow keeping motivation high for adherence to the therapy, providing information on the go. So now we have a lot of apps that support and kind of try to motivate the person to do exercise whenever they can. But that's it. So that was the attention to the emotional needs of the patient. And if you talk to patient and physician, that's not enough. As the goal of physical rehabilitation is to get the person to function to the extent they can. And they say they may become better at doing the exercise, so they may build the muscles for that. But what we see is that they don't easily translate those gained capability into performing tasks in real life. So something is in a movement, and you can see adopting very strange strategies that in fact lead to even more pain. But the fear is there, and this fear brings people to avoid exercise or to engage in a way that is not really useful. And if you look at the literature on the multidisciplinary chronic condition management programs, they really leave the physical aspect a little bit on the side to give much more attention to the psychological aspect and the personal aspect. This happens especially when it's outside of the acute phase, when the person moves in the home and the therapy has to continue. So they have to help the person to be able to deal with the variety of psychological needs that are there, and the fear of doing the movement, the anxiety, the fatigue, pain, but also other emotions as the embarrassment of doing movement that may be very easy for others and they're not anymore for certain people, and doing them in front of other, confidence of being able to do and to recover certain capability, and so on. The range of emotion is really, really wide, and it's not just about motivation. And of course, there is a personal aspect where people, when they go to the clinic, they have a time they have cut out for doing the therapy. But when they do self-management in their home, they also have a social role. They are a mother, a father. In the company, they are a colleague, and they have to work. They have to dedicate time to other activity they still try to engage with. And unfortunately, this takes time away. And not just time, but it takes the physical resources that are very limited in the situation. So that's why this multidisciplinary program for many conditions, not the one only the one I'm working on, chronic pain, but also for stroke, MS, any type of long-term condition that requires self-management, needs this kind of needs to address this kind of needs. So in the Emo Pain project is a project funded by EPSRCs, the UK funding body, and by other charity as the Rose Tree Trust, and supported by the Hospital for Neurology and Neurosurgery in London, aim to bring those some affective capability into the design of the technology. On one side, aim to try to build technology that can sense different emotional state as the person engage in physical activity, and on the other side also try to develop intervention that could be that technology-based, so they can be used outside the clinic, and they help people to regulate their emotions. So I present these two sides of the project. So the first thing we had to do is, when we started, is to think how do we read those emotions. And looking at the literature in chronic pain, there was clear attention to how the person moves and how much you can read from the way the person moves or doesn't move, or adopt movement strategies to avoid to engage certain part of the body. And the different literatures reveal that those even microanalysis of the movement would really provide a lot of insight on the psychological capability of the person to engage in the therapy and the self-management of their condition, not to be more at risk and of further deterioration. So we focus on looking at the body movement also because less explored in the area of affective computing at that time, but also most importantly is because we wanted to not just focus on a very situated exercise session, but really think into the functional activities, so people moving around their life and being supported in that situation. So we use a motion capture system, so a suit with 18 sensors on the placed on different parts of the body to measure body configuration, and also some kinematics like speed, acceleration, and other features that were emerging from the literature. And also EMG sensor to measure the muscle activity. The literature was showing that in chronic pain, despite there will be no injury that justify the pain, people tended to, there was a very abnormal activation of the muscle in response to, not to pain only, but to anxiety, to the fear of engaging in that particular movement. So we collect different, we monitor people doing physical activity using this technology. We had also other sensors. I'm not talking about those today. And we collecting data from their body movement, and in yellow here you can see their muscle activity, average over a certain window. During typical physical rehabilitation exercise for chronic pain, musculoskeletal chronic pain, and that means also typical movement we do every day, but when you have chronic pain, you find very challenges. That's sit to stand or stretching to take something from far away, and just walking and so on. So different activity. The words that appear there are the labeling of the video from the physiotherapist. So we ask physiotherapists to go through the video and identify the type of the protective behavior that may indicate either pain, but also anxiety to engage with engage in that movement. So here, just to give you a simple feature of that already quite informative and discriminating to a certain extent between the different groups, just visually, and it's just the angle knee as the person sit down, and we can see the healthy people in green here in the middle, and the patients split in two populations according to the labeling from the physiotherapist. The high guardian probably showing more anxiety to engage on that movement or more pain, and a blue one as a more showing more less fear to engage in that particular movement, so more smooth movement. And we can see that the green in the middle, because they engage the movement of the knee much earlier, and there is synergy between upper and lower body. While the red people, probably before bending their knee, they start to try to find the support, and then they go down. While the low guarding people, they tend to just use the force of by looking at the video, using the muscle of the leg, and just go down without engaging too much the trunk. And of course, this may lead, in both cases, to more pain rather than facilitating the movement, because it requires more strength in certain part of the body. Here, muscle activity. At the top, healthy people doing a stretching forward exercise. So you have a maximum contraction of the muscle of the low back pain when they are stretching forward, and then they relax when they return to the standing position. But in the case of people with chronic pain, a typical type of muscle activation, you have the muscle, the activation increasing as the person stretches forward. But when they return in standing position, they remain contracted for a while, just with the fear of relaxing and feeling pain. Some of you may experience that if you had a little one day of pain because they're carrying very heavy load for some time, so not chronic pain, but you have that tendency to protect yourself and remain stiff. And unfortunately, that may lead to further pain. Or they don't engage that part of the body at all, and avoid completely either through the part of the body or even not engaging the movement at all. And of course, many variations of this pattern. So we decided to focus on few affective state and pain. From the literature, this were the one more addressed in modeling the relation between emotional responses and avoidance and deterioration of the patient. So we look at possibility to detect from the movement and the muscle activity the level of pain, the level of anxiety, and also self-efficacy in terms of confidence of being able to do that movement, and also depression measured through standardized questionnaire. And this measures through self-report from the patient, and self-efficacy measured by the physiotherapist. So we use the sensor I mentioned before, plus very standard technique for machine learning, and of course more can be done here. But we wanted really to get a proof of concept of how informative was the body, the information we could capture from the body. And here, if it's running, it's just to just show some of the data. So here is an healthy person. So the system, in theory, should be real time, but the system is reading real data we collect. We can see the muscle here activating as the person bends and then relaxing when the bending, when they reach the floor, and then reactivating as the person go up. And so the system is predicting here the result, recognizing a control patient. This is a patient, and you can see much less bending of the body and much less involvement of the muscle. So probably stretching the minimum necessary to do a little bit of the bending. And and again the prediction up here. And here is what the person reported. Here is a sit to stand. So we have built a database of this data, and here is to give you an idea of the type of feature we are using. So we analyzed this, all this video with the physiotherapist, going through them and having them to talk loudly and describing what they were reading in their body and how they were reading it, looking at the literature on pain, and having more workshop with physiotherapists, and also analysis of visual analysis of all the data we collect. And here is some of the most informative feature that emerge for the exercise that require stretching forward of the trunk or bending very much, not just the trunk, but how the head is kept stiff and the stiffening of the arm. And here very much the seeing how the muscle relax mainly when the person return or when the muscle activity is not necessary in the position. Sit to stand, we used a similar feature, but we needed to add more as the type of activity become more complex. So sit to stand is much more as different phases. You can see, for example, when those phases occur, when the person starts to stand up from the chair, what is the configuration of the body, where are the feet kept, and so on. Given more information on the strategy that is really indicating avoidance of that movement. Here is just to give you a flavor of the result. We can see very easily to predict in full flexion, because as you can see when I show the system, people avoid to bend. So it's just very simple, and especially in the case of high anxiety or high pain. But for the stretch forward, we still have quite interesting results to distinguish two levels of pain and from healthy people. And it becomes more complex, as I said before, as the strategies, as the exercise become more complex. We can see the number of strategies appear, and possibly we need even more data really to cover the different activity, but still quite interesting result with very simple machine learning technique. Here for detecting confidence in doing the movement, according to how the physiotherapist has rated that, for only 2, we didn't have enough instances for the full flexion. You can see the result for sit to stand and for forward flexion. And what was interesting for us is when we passed to model emotional distress, we look at the literature on emotional distress in affective computing and in the clinical literature and see the typical feature of slow movement and a closed body. And this feature were still the most effective here, even if the context we consider was a person moving and engaging in physical activity. So we are working much better than the feature we use for detecting the other states. But we had to add a few features, especially for the heads. Often, rather than being down, it would be up just again for this tendency to contract your body and to protect you. So there is some differences, but very much a similar feature behavior. And this is also interesting because the literature in chronic pain doesn't really describe those kind of the relation of body movement and all those emotions in that context. So it really need to enrich that analysis of body behavior towards other emotional states. Here's the result. We had only 2 states because it's very hard, difficult to engage people with a very high, very low mood or very high depression for the moment. So here we did an analysis of all the features and trying to identify the most informative one, because the suit we used was very expensive, was a commercial one, something that we can't use everyday situation, and trying to think to a wearable device with very limited set of sensors. So we identified the most informative, and so the positioning of the sensor. We try to just cover one side of the body. In this case, person can decide which side. So we have the arm, the leg, one on the head, and then we have an EMG on one side of the body, lower and upper trunk from the floor. And this activity, working with patient, even if they are very similar, person become much more anxious when they have to do a functional activity. It's just less control. They feel less in control. And think if there were people around there and saying depression, I have to do it quickly. So just telling them you have to do the same exercise, but now you take the key, that changed the situation from an emotional perspective. It was interesting that training the system on the exercise data and very few from the functional activity, we could still get quite interesting data. And that's really important because collecting data during functional activity is not that easy for the reasons said before. But hopefully as the person start to use, then you could think you can personalize further the system. So the first part of the project was really about can we detect emotion? We look at this modality, other modality, and the idea is then to use these runtime detections as the person moves to personalize the feedback that the technology can provide to help the person to pace and perform and going around their activity, both exercise or functional. But at the same time, as I said before, we're starting to look also the other side of the story and say, can we develop intervention that do not only focus on the physical activity itself, but address the emotional need of the person? Just a few words on chronic pain. So all this project was focused on musculoskeletal chronic pain and low back pain in particular. But chronic pain is different from acute pain. I don't know how many are you familiar with this area. And acute pain is good. It tells us you have an injury, you have an inflammation, you have to take care. And it helps to protect us from further injury. But the chronic pain instead is maladaptive pain. It's not explained, there is no injury, there is no inflammation in the body. It's just that the central and peripheral nervous system are creating pain signals or amplifying pain signals. So you practically feel pain. Pain is real, it's there, it's not imagined, but it's not due to an injury. Still, you protect yourself because we are designed to react in this way to pain. And unfortunately, by protecting yourself, you're creating more problem to your body, as we discussed before, overusing some part of the body or just not moving anymore with a loss of capability and muscle structure. So talking to physiotherapists and patients, how can we help people to overcome this fear of movement and engage in movement? And it was very interesting, and we report all this result in the paper. But for example, here a physiotherapist say, I'm not telling them now you have to do the stretches, because that would say, oh my God, give them a time to become anxious. But I would do the movement in front of them and then talk through it. And then they will start to do the movement together with me. Now use the tense, we are bending rather than we bend. We are bending, really emphasizing this idea that you are in movement. Your body can move, is able to move, and you're doing something. And then, so we are bending, now we are bending, we are reaching the knees, and so on. Really giving them also this attention to their body and not just to their pain. This is just an example, but we built a lot on all this, what we learned from the physiotherapist and the patient. And this is a simple device, the simplest one, but very effective on patients. And it's just the first one was just a smartphone placed on the back on the part of the body to train. In this exercise is the back. And the sensor in the phone captured the movement of the trunk as the person stretched forward and transformed this into sound. And, excuse me, no? Yeah. So, thank you. So you can see here a patient. So the first thing, okay, I try again. So before using the device, the person needs to calibrate the device to the range of movement they want to do. So to the standing position, to the maximum stretch, and to the point where they start to be, they feel that are becoming anxious if they stretch beyond that point. So this intermediate point, that is really defined and different for each person. Some person stretch very little, some person stretch quite a lot, and still they suffer from the same condition. So the first phase is that.
And you're most comfortable?
So this is intermediate point. And this is the maximum. You can see here some protective behavior coming up and using their arm. So now the person is still helping because he's learning to use the device. So now the sensor in the phone on the back is capturing that movement, and you hear the sound going up to the central point.
Then it goes down to your maximum, and
Yeah.
flattens out.
So you can see here protective behavior, pushing backward.
You want to explore it.
So I'll let you see a little bit of.
Yeah, sort of focus more on the noise than I am on the fact that it's sore.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. So as you hear, I don't know if you heard at the end, you say, I like it. I focus more on the sound than on the fact that it's painful, it's sore. And many people that we in the focus group and control study, they talk about their body reappearing from behind the pain. Because in chronic pain, so the lack of awareness of your body is partially due to the fear you have of engagement. So you're there listening when the pain is going to become stronger and you should stop. But also the proprioceptive sensor have changed, the receptor have changed possibly their role, and they're very sensitized to listen pain rather than your body configuration. They also talk about the sound, again, being a representation of their movement to give an idea of where their body is. Say with the shape sound, it seems like I was climbing a mountain. After passing the top position, I would have passed a certain level, and that encouraged me to go further. But without the sound, you have no idea what your body is doing. Here is, we try with many sounds. The green one is the one you heard, is the more successful because it's carrying information. The blue one is no sound. The red one is just the same note, plays over and over, so just hear sound, but no other information. And the blue one is water splash. So it's more naturalistic with the idea that could be more pleasurable. People reported to really feel that they can perform with the more informative sounds. The idea that it's not the flat sounds, but progressing, you know your body is progressing, and you also know you have reached certain milestones. They report we ask them how much you're bending. You can see a big difference by having information, and they do bend a little bit more, but that was not our point, because it's very important not to push them to really overdo or underdo. Using music, active listening, people like it, they found it motivating, but when they were doing exercise they were afraid of, the tone, the way one you saw before was much more useful, they reported, because they say you need information, and it doesn't have to be disrupted, it needs to help you to focus on the movement. Because, again, the fear, there is the danger that we are going to stretch too far. So all this fear, there is no danger to stretch too far, but the fear is there, and you need to provide that sense of control on knowing what your body is doing. Another interesting finding from this study is that people reported that say, well, you know, when I'm at home, I can't do much exercise because it's not my priority. I have a lot to do. And if it's a good day, I can do something. I will do what I have to do and not the exercise. But I can use your device for this, and this will be very useful. So we gave the device at home for 2 weeks and said, do what you want with the device. We simplify the use. You have a T-shirt where you can put the phone in the pocket and a controller, so like the TV controller. controller, so you can calibrate the device, and you can also put it on the arm, on the leg, on the different part of the body. And here are example of use the people did of the device. So, forgot again. But. And so you can see the person hesitating. We were very surprised that people could stand that sound for so long and doing activity with that, because we had designed the sound for the exercise. But for people was information. And again, and that came out also for another situation that they may have even TV on. And the sound was their body. Say, I am hesitant about leaning forward and reaching for the washing machine is painful. But with the sound, I realized I could do rollback, another technique, and pacing, like I do in the exercise. So I'm finally able to apply the pacing technique I learned at the clinic, to apply them not just in the exercise, but in the functional activity, just because I can see now my body through the sound, and I can also match exercise and related movement. They initially stretched calibrated the device to what they thought they could do in the exercise, and that kept, the first day, kept the device on, and they realized that when they go about their house, in fact, they do more than what they think they can do. Many patients will come to the doctor and say, I cannot turn my neck, and then they ask, okay, turn, and they would just start to contract and be scared and realize they can't do. But when they are a little bit like more distracted, you see that movement coming about. So there was a lot of learning through this sound for them. It was very important. And there was a lot of recalibration they were doing according to the activities. So as we saw for the washing machine, people calibrated not to what they wanted to do, but what the activity needed, because the information was useful to remind them to pace, to remind them to take a break. For small activity like cooking or writing, they would calibrate to a smaller range because it was something they could do. They felt confident they could do. They would learn about their body, but also learning when their body was becoming tired and stiff. So this is a nice code. So with the sound, people can play with their movement and see pattern of what affect them, that they can do more than what they need to remind to take break or whatever. It's the difference between seeing it or hearing it in this case and being told. They say the physiotherapists tell them, you can do that, you see, but one thing is really experiencing it with your own body and your feedback. So that for us was very interesting, and seeing that people would hear the sound also a feeling that of achievement. And of course we are working on making that sound more pleasurable, but for that sound, for them as really information, they play a different role. And here is where the two parts of the detection and this intervention will try to get together. So patient asks, can the device calibrate or suggest the calibration range that are useful? At the same time, the device should know that if I drop something, I have to bend to pick it up, and I leave alone, but it doesn't mean I can do that. So the device needs to read when I do that movement in a good way, in a confident way, and when I do it in a painful way. And they alternate between good days and bad days. It's not something that gets better and better, but it just fluctuates. So the device needs to read such thing. So we hope to get these two parts together. So I'd like to give you another example of project where we look at health and well-being, and now we can use sensing technology to recognize the affective state. This is a very different setting. It's not clinical, but is in the context of work floor in the industry. It's the human project, human manufacturing project. It's a new project we started this year. It's a H2020 project with a large consortium and with industry. We work with Airbus, with Royo building furniture for bathroom, and Kumao building larger robots. So very different type of activity. An airplane may take 6 months to build. Building furniture for bathroom, you build many in one day. So you have different type of pressure, different type of needs. What we are trying to do here is to use augmented reality to bring people information when they need and to facilitate the work, not to substitute the person, but really to make their work easier, but also use a sensor a wearable sensor that can detect, for example, tiredness, physical tiredness, but also mental tiredness or stress, like building, as you are paid for every object you build. So there is a stress of trying to build as much as you can in one day, but without making error and so on. But also other type of stress, so not making mistakes and so on. So we just started on this project. As I said, there are different parts built here, but I'm going just to present a small thing we have done in relation to detecting mental stress or mental load. So we are exploring the use of thermal imaging. Thermal imaging were very expensive until a couple of years ago, on order of $5,000 or $10,000, and quite bulky, so not really useful for HCI contest. And now they are becoming very tiny. They cost 150 pounds, $50, and they have been integrating in mobile phones. So very different. So they start to be possible to think about using them in the context of everyday life activity. And here what we are doing is one of the signs of the cues we are trying to detect in relation to stress or mental load is breathing, because of the literature. So looking at how the breathing pattern change. And here is just an example from the camera. So we practically detect the changing in temperature in front of the nostril. And you can see here the changes in temperature from inhalation, exhalation in deep breathing. And here in case of shallow breathing. So you can see the big difference we have here in changing temperature in this area and not in this area. So the idea is to have somehow a camera position in a way that can read track this nostril area, and it could be placed as could be now in my computer, or if I'm moving around and I want to use it. For some people who are suffering from breathing problem, you can have a mobile phone in front of them, or in the case of the project, we are integrating in the type of accessory the person has, so in the factory floor, so that we have a camera so tiny that is positioned in a way that it can track more easily that part of the body. One of the big challenges we have with low-cost camera, with a thermal camera, differently from a normal camera, is that they are not sensitive to lighting, so you can use in the night. They still work, but they are sensitive in temperature changes in the environment. So, for example, if there is a hair cone, or if I'm on the door or a corner of a street where you can have a ruffle of wind, what is read by the camera is completely different, and so you could have the camera would fail in tracking the nostril. And so we had to work around this problem. And the other problem is that it's a low-cost camera, so the resolution is very low compared to the very expensive camera. So first we work on building a tracking, a more robust tracking method of the ROI area. I'm not going into the detail. You can find the detail in the paper here. But practically we built a better adaptive color mapping that takes into account continuously of changes in the temperature in the environment where you have as it track the ROI of interest. And also we improve the state of the art of tracking algorithm to consider also very a highly moving situation that we will need in a human. And also we develop a new way to compute the temperature there that is not, typically we use the average that is much more prone to error. Here you have an example of the, so in this case the head is registered. The upper part is the traditional, the more state-of-the-art tracking algorithm, and on the bottom is the hour. And so you can see how we're still tracking the breathing quite well. You can see here starting to have problem in reading the ROI and then failing in detecting. We collected data. These data are available in a situation with very controlled respiration pattern, but in very specific context of where temperature change a lot. And then we collect in the same during particular task. and in very unconstrained situation of people in moving around, climbing stairs, walking in the parks, and so on, really to test the systems throughout all these different situations. So here are some results. Our system is the black one. Here is the different type of place with different problem of temperature. Here, the most unconstrained situation. And is a comparison of the tracking result with the best performing algorithm in the similar area. And we can see our system really improved the result when the situation become much more unconstrained, either in terms of environment or in terms of movement. Typical study that used the thermal camera, they ask the person to keep, either they have a chin rest or ask the person to keep the head steady. As I say, we want to detect stress, so we expose the person to different stressing tasks, math or Stroop test in random order, and asking them to report their level of stress after each task, and also having period of relaxation for baseline. Here is a representation of the breathing and the non-stress condition according to what people reported. And you can see on the while the frequency level, you can see how the pattern are changes as the stress increase. Again, you can see result in the paper to be presented next week. We use some deep learning, and also we use K-mean to categorize the self-report from the person. We use deep learning, but we use an augmented technique to deal with the problem of not having enough data. And here some initial result for 2-level or 3-level classification. Again, now we are using it we are starting to do study in the human situation where people are building furniture, so we probably will have to improve further the algorithm to be robust to so much changes. Don't know if I have still 5 minutes, otherwise I stop here. Yeah. So last study. This was led by Anna Tajadura. She was a postdoc in my lab, and now she moved first to Loyola, and then now she's in Madrid University. And she was doing a fellowship, Future Leader Fellowship at UCL. The project was called the Hearing Body. The idea was to alter the perception of your body side, of your body capability, by altering the feedback your body will make as you move. This is done a lot in virtual reality, where you move but you see your hands maybe longer or your body taller through the head-mounted display, and people do really report and behave if their body is different. And this is because the perception of our body is not fixed. It's continually updated. I do this, and my brain now knows that my arm is extended, and so on. And you can alter the perception of the length of the arm by playing, rather than hearing the sound here, hearing it further away. And do people start to behave for a moment if they had longer arms? So we briefly say about this study, and then how we use this technology in the health context. She developed this pair of shoes where she attached a microphone here to the shoes. So when you walk, the microphone captures the steps, the sound of your steps, and play it back to your ear. We were working on the fact that when somebody's walking behind you, from the sound of the step, you are very good at guessing is a big person or a small person, and so on. We wanted to see if we do the same when we hear our sound. If I'm modifying the sound you make as you walk, you know they are your sound because they are congruent with the fact that you're moving, but modifying it, do you feel lighter or heavier? And this is the journalist using the shoes. So this is the normal sound, just amplified. Now is altered, so we pass only the low frequencies that give an idea of heaviness. So now is the high frequency that should give a feeling of being lighter.
But I feel like I'm only, I feel like you're interrupting down the speed.
So this is a journalist, so and they produced this video. But we had the people walking, no, not in place, but walking along this wooden platform. And then at the end, they had to indicate the body size through an avatar and fill some questionnaire. And you could, and then we sense also the way they were walking. So they had sensor on their leg to measure the acceleration of their foot, the pressure of the contact time of their foot on the floor. And people did report to feel much tired and to feel lighter with the high frequency and more tired with the low frequency. And you can see differences in heel contact time, so typical walking of a heavier person compared to a higher, lighter person, so less contact time in the high frequency. But people reported to be lighter with the high frequency. And there was also an emotional response in their face and also in the GSR and higher acceleration. People said it's easier to walk with the high frequency. So this is a study done a few years ago. We talked with clinicians and they saw that the demo and they said we can use it for therapy. It would be very interesting to study these shoes in the context of a particular type of pain, is complex regional pain syndrome. It's a terrible condition. So you feel intense pain, again, not explained by any injury, any inflammation, but the pain is real. And you also feel your body alter, so you feel it as you see. These are drawing from the patient of their body. They may feel a limb that is swollen, is very big, and maybe they don't feel part of their body. It's almost the opposite of the phantom limb, where they have the part move, they have the part, they can move it, but they don't feel it, they don't want to use it. And often they tend to use a wheelchair or they block their arm despite they couldn't move it. And this is due again to alteration on the somatosensory cortex in this side. So we tried, and this is my last slide before last couple of slides. So here is the person, one person drawing from one person, and you can see doesn't see much of their body, just these parts, but you feel the head heavy. And here is after using the shoes, immediately after, redrawing their body. And you can see here some part of the body disappearing, more clear, less heavy head. This part is less intense, possibly because of the appearing on the other part. And this is just one extreme drawing, and we have different drawing you can see in the paper. And now this was a pilot study, so we hope now to extend it to a larger population. The condition is very complex. For some people, they have this big limb, the limb is perceived as bigger. For other, it disappears. And other have a mixed condition with certain part of the body disappearing, others become bigger. So probably there is an interaction here. But it was interesting to see, no matter what the sound, for people who perceive the limb bigger, there was a decrease in terms of heaviness. And for most interesting, the more clear result for the people who have nothing, of have part of the body disappearing. And people report perceive body stronger, feeling in control, knowing where the body part is. So that's very important because they tend to ignore that, and feeling change in limb size and possibly increase in pain. That was not a negative result. A possible suggestion that the increase in pain, it could be when, especially when you ignore the limb, is kind of reappearing, and then you can work upon. But of course, these are just conjecture. But if you are interested, you can see the publication there. The project is continuing on as a Magic 2 project now in Spain, and we are looking at the use of the shoes in various conditions, both well-being and clinical setting. So thanks again for listening. So I have really very much passion in studying how the body relate to our emotion and how these are plastic. We can work on them, and in many cases it can really bring big changes in people's life, and how each emotion need to be understood and treated as differently because they raise different needs. In the paper we are submitting now, we explain a large study we have done with them and how each emotion is dealt differently, both proposed by the patient or in the context of the physiotherapy. And for me, the other big lesson I got from this study is that we started the exercise, and knowing that physiotherapists are really targeting functional activity. Of course, it depends on the condition to the extent they can, but the final target is the functional activity. And the idea really to move, especially when the person leaves the hospital, to move the therapy into their life, into their everyday activity, because it's easier to gain and translate directly. If you gain while you gain capability while you are functioning, you gain confidence in being able to function, and it becomes a nice loop. While if you always have to translate and you're learning in the exercise, you still have that emotional gap, or say, I can do it even in a social setting where there is a lot of pressure, or things are not positioned the way you want. So hopefully the wearable technology will allow us to move more into that part of people's life. Thank you.
Tenemos tiempo para dos o tres preguntas.
Thank you for the very interesting talk.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you about specific findings related to emotions, because I see that there is a lot of results that have to do with perception, or proprioception, or whatever that is called, with the awareness of where you are or how your body is positioned. But I don't understand exactly if you have any findings regarding how emotion changed or how affective states evolved during the use of sound-based devices. And because in the first example, it seems that people were more aware of how they were extending, and in the last one about the weight of their shoes, or the effect they had. But did you have any findings regarding of their emotion or affective states?
So are you referring to one project, or in particular, or in general?
Actually, the first and the third one.
So in the first one, for us, for example, the fact that they were more aware of their body, that led them to feel different about themselves. And for us, that means I'm more, I feel better about myself because I can see I can do something. So it's about building confidence in moving, because you are aware, you can listen to your body. So they have very low confidence in being able to do. And that leads to a more positive perception of yourself and of your capability. And so so we were not interested in measuring directly, oh, now the person is happy, but in measuring the fact that the person inside probably did feel better because it felt more capable of doing things. And the way also report or feeling in control. I can move. We have some people crying, asking, can I get the device with me? And so there was that emotional change that is subtle. They may not be even aware that you can see the person smiling. You may not be aware that you're smiling, but you are now able to deal with your body differently. And a lot of work in affective computing is about detecting those basic emotions. And for me, it's about what are the emotions that is important in that particular real-life application, and what is the role, and what I have to change. Maybe I don't have to change the emotion, but I just have to address the problem that creates that emotion. And I think it's very similar in the second part, so as the fact that there is a negative state, because I don't even want to use the arm. The person can move the arm, but they block it. Or they use the wheelchair, and it's again reconnecting. And of course, pain is also an emotional, as a sensorial and emotional experience. So.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Nadia, for your talk. You have been using sound to make the patients aware of their body. have you considered other forms of feedback? Like, I mean, you could use videos, or you can use vibrating devices or something besides music or sound.
So when we had to decide, we decided sound for a variety of reasons. Some it was that people were talking about the voice of the physiotherapist and describing their movement, and that was inviting that. And the sound, there is a lot of literature on sound showing that sonification has certain effect on motor learning and reconnecting. And vision was not, initially we had started, when we wrote the project, we talked about vision too, but we wanted something that didn't require the person to, I'm doing a stretching forward and I have to look up or down. So the sound, you can close your eyes and hearing the sound. So the vision was not really a good one for us. We wanted to go away, having the person moving naturally. We are considering tactile. When we ran the home study with the washing machine, we quickly put the tactile, but it broke down and it didn't work. So people talk about bringing the tactile in when they're in a social context. Some people went out in the supermarket making sound, and people asking, why are you making sound? They wanted to discover themselves outside. And so in those situations, the tactile feedback could be interesting. I am not sure, and I don't know because I haven't not studied, I'm not sure that it will have the same effect that sound. I think in terms of the resolution, the body ability to detect small changes from a vibrotactile is not as good as it is for sound. So for us, it was very interesting to see how people were learning about their body by listening to the sound and being very quick at detecting differences. And I think in the learning situation about the body, the sound is very powerful. I'm not sure the vibrotactile will work. But in other situations where the patient talk about, they talk about different phases. And one phase is that I would like the device to take over. She's going to control my body because I have to do other things. And you tell me, look, you need a rest now because you are becoming very... So it could be working as that kind of alarm, and probably the vibrotactile would be more useful there. But when they are learning about what can I really do and how can I improve, you really need something that provides that continuous information. But I need the funding to run that comparison and see if I'm wrong or right. But yeah.
Okay, we are running a bit late, so we'll have to stop here, but Nadia is around.
I'm around, yeah.
Actually, she's here until Saturday.
Yes, I'm lucky. Luckier than you.
You can contact her later, and we'll thank again Nadia for being here and for her talk, and give her a small token of our appreciation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Y tenemos inmediatamente el panel de las mujeres en computación, así que invitamos a las panelistas a pasar al frente.